then we have, of course, Nakaya Rucker. Nakaya, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. I can't believe this is our last flagship Friday for the semester. I was looking at my calendar. I'm like, what am I going to do on Fridays from noon to 1:30? But I just have a little bit more space in my calendar. But welcome, everyone. My name is Nakaya Rucker, and I'm the External Relations Director at the University Library. I just want to remind you all to use the chat in order to engage in the conversation with us. Please don't hold your insights or questions to the very end. We'll be sure to sprinkle those in as we have this conversation with James. Thank you.
Great. And Nakaya and Anna Luge and Abram Anders, who will not be here today, are my cohorts in crime, I guess, as we go forward and kind of march all over the university to create innovation programming. Anna Luge, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So welcome, James, to our last fall flagship series, but there's more to come in the spring. So Nakaya, keep that slot open because we need to keep that open for the spring. My name is Anna Luge. I recently joined Iowa State for the College of Design, Department of Industrial Design. And I think the reason why Karen paired me with James is because we have design thinking in common. But actually, more than that, James was literally pivot in my life when I arrived because he was very welcoming and he made me think about lots of things about innovation and entrepreneurship. Those are the topics that I teach in the college. But one of the things that we are trying to bring to you is this connection between what you are doing in your academic studies with partners from industry. And if you are smart, you will want to connect with James. James is one of the best industry partners that we have on board. So enroll for his things in the spring semester. And I'm sure I'm saying this from my own experience, but I'm sure that if you have questions or insights or things that you want to share with James, he's very open to hear your thoughts. So this would be us introducing you to James, not just grilling him with questions. So welcome, James. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah. And so as we, go ahead, James. Oh, as we do with every session, we're going to start with our Did You Know Innovation Fact for the week. We actually have two of them. One, congratulations are in order. Iowa State just jumped in the Princeton College rankings for entrepreneurship and innovation from 26th to 11 in the rankings. That is a really big deal. Also, thanks in large part to the work that Judy Isles does and how she coordinates, counts, delivers the work our students are doing in the entrepreneurship front. This is really a big accomplishment for our university and a testimony to how our students are influencing, creating knowledge capital, social capital, civic capital, and economic capital. So we are out there doing it and building it. We just have to really take a moment to really celebrate that really unique fact here today. Also, we are, as we end the semester, I did want to make you aware that all this programming is new. And the miracle of this is we have 48 industry partners, collaborators who donate their time. Or for that, a lot of our industry collaborators are donating their time as we build these programs and in delivering programming. So that has been one of the most unusual characteristics and experiences I've had in my tradition of education. And many, I would say 70% of these industry partners are also working in other ways with our students. So that's a whole other slew of faculty, right? Real world faculty that are giving our students this real world experience. So at the end of the semester, here we are. What do the numbers look like? 48 industry stakeholders delivering programs and more than 4,700 registrations, people who are enrolled in our new innovation programming, and 44 student innovation fellows. If you want to find out more about those programs, please visit our student innovation website. Maybe Nakaya can put that in the chat, both for flagship Fridays as well as for our circuit training. So let me introduce James Altamirano, who I have had the privilege of working with in so many ways. Honestly, anything that we have asked James to do, he has said yes wholeheartedly and I'm in. He is a key university partner in not just innovation, but with the entrepreneurship initiative, with the College of Business. In so many ways, he has influenced our university dialogue about how do we strategize and innovate going forward. James is an entrepreneur turned intrapreneur at Principal Financial Group, where he's helped develop Principal's human-centered design practice. He's an avid champion for how large organizations might reimagine and overcome barriers to driving impactful innovation. His work is currently influencing Principal's enterprise innovation strategy, along with workforce and culture initiatives around innovation mindset, and how do we imagine an ecosystem for co-design and co-creation between corporations, startups, and academia. So I'm just really pleased, James, to welcome you here today, and we're going to really begin to get started, and I might kick us off. Anna, do you have an initial question? I'm sure Anna has a question for you because she's worked so closely with you. Anna, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I do have 1,000 questions, but let's start with the first initial one. And James, you are prepared, I know. Who are you? Now, what we would like to start in the first part of our conversation is if you can tell us a little bit about your story, professionally speaking, or if there's a little bit of salt and pepper of personal things that happen, but how did you become this innovator? What is your innovation story to share with our students? Let's start there.
Totally. Yeah, no, first of all, I just want to, again, really thank you all for having me here. And honestly, it's an honor because I've seen all of the participants that you've had in these flagship series, and it's pretty impressive. So, you know, just the pressure to meet the talent that's there is definitely on. It's been an awesome journey, right? Even thinking about the engagement and the partnership with all of you kind of mirrors and mimics what my story has been. I certainly didn't wake up someday and think, oh, I'm going to be an innovator. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And I have a neatly planned track to get there. I started my career in finance and sales, and I worked for both some big companies and small companies. But I always had a knack that I kind of figured early on around starting new ideas. I really enjoyed being part of something new, and that kind of took me down the startup path. And through that, I was able to join a couple of startups, startup ventures. I did some consulting work on my own. I helped to launch a nonprofit. And somewhere in that journey, right around when I decided that to swear off corporate America, when I said I was never going to go back to corporate America, sure enough, I found this opportunity at Principal. And what attracted me to Principal in this particular opportunity was I saw a chance to do something I didn't think I could see in corporate America, which was to help start something within a large organization and figure out what the challenges were to do something like that. So yeah, the past 6 years, I've been really enjoying this journey of helping to develop a human-centered design practice and strategies around corporate innovation, and now even a little bit of dipping our toes into intrapreneurship within the organization.
Okay, I'll pick up on that. So how do you do that? How do you start something within corporate America? Where do you start? What would be like the biggest things that you fear or the biggest thing that motivate you to go forward? Because even if you say you didn't wake up one morning and say, now I'm an innovator, you are doing it. So how do you tackle that for our students? How do you start that? How do you engage with
I think that's
I might add to that a little bit too. Many of our students, James, are actually beginning to really own their education in a brand new way. They are actually trying to innovate from within. Some of them are adopting projects where they're proposing things to their chairs and their deans, and where they are really owning how to brand and build their own experience. So this will be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's also a loaded question. So I'm going to try to unpack that, or maybe you guys can help me unpack it a little bit. So how do you do it? I think to begin with, innovation innovation, just doing innovation work can be really attractive to people, right? In the front of it, you think about these millennials that are out in Silicon Valley in some really cool workspaces with hoodies and sneakers and coming up, dreaming up great ideas and technologies and bringing them to the world, right?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, part of that is true, right? That there are people that are doing that, but what you don't see is the stuff that happens behind the scenes. And what's happening behind the scenes is also that it's a journey that is really hard and a lot of times very frustrating and sometimes uncomfortable for yourself and for the people that are joining you on that journey. And a lot of times it's thankless, particularly in a corporate environment. I think that one quick distinction between corporate innovation and innovation that happens out in the market, which a lot of times leads towards entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are out there starting their idea, and it is about them and their idea, right? So they get to have a little bit of that spotlight, which is okay. That's part of what comes with the territory. They might not have as much support, but they certainly own the whole thing. Entrepreneurs have to figure out how to get things done through others. And a lot of times that means that you don't get the spotlight. Someone else is getting the spotlight for whatever it is that you're doing because you're delivering, you're executing through other people. So all of that to say, what's happening behind the scenes is it's hard. There are times that you feel really lonely because you're pushing for something that not everyone understands. One of the things that I want to share with the group today is the journeys in learning from failure. What are those things that have taught you to persevere and be resilient in innovation, which I think is really important. So a lot of times those things that you're learning to do to accomplish your question about how do you do it in a corporation is figuring out how to connect with people. And when you are not able to inspire them to see your vision, you got to figure out a new way to inspire them or a new way to communicate with them or a new way to invite them into your journey and have them come along. And most of the time, you're going to get in that process, you're going to get people saying no, people saying, I don't get it, people not saying anything at all, just not doing anything with what you're doing. And you have to stay resilient. You have to keep believing and keep doing what you're doing and pushing for change. So I'll dig into that with a bit more detail about what are some of those things and talk about like the pilot if you guys want me to go there next.
Yeah. It's a great segue.
Yeah, I particularly because one of the things the students are struggling with, I think, and even, this is a new innovation initiative. How do you get people to follow you? How do you influence? And how do you engage people, especially in an environment like this right now where things are unpredictable? People have a lot on their plate, and I think we go to the default of we can't approach people right now because they have too much on their plate. But in fact, if any innovation, if there's ever a time we need innovation, it's now. So how do you get people to follow you?
Can I rephrase that? Could
Yeah.
I rephrase that? Because I know how you do it now, but did you know in the beginning?
No.
And what were the things that you learned throughout this, I'm going to say a decade, because it's not just this 6 years at Principal. So what were the things that you now know that you wish you said to younger James?
Yeah, man, these questions, they're pretty good. Here's the thing. I certainly did not know, and I would consider myself still to be in diapers in terms of learning, right, and knowing what it takes. Not just in corporate America, but just in pursuing doing innovative things and bringing new solutions into the world in life, just in general, right, and how you approach that. I can tell you that in my journey, when I started off, I'm a very passionate guy. And I look at big picture things, and I get excited about those things. And so, the first thing that I would do is come and tell everybody about it, and get so excited, and just get people, like I need to tell you about it, or I need to present this to you, or want to, I want to, in a way, kind of like show you, right? But I started to, what I learned in the process is if you come in and you start pitching an idea to people, and all you want to do is talk at them and talk about what you're doing or what you want to do, you're not taking the time to listen to them and understand where they're coming from. And you're not taking the time to actually invite them to be part of this journey with you. Then a lot of times they won't join you on the journey. That's when they didn't join me on the journey, at least from my experience. That's when I feel like either, again, what I would get is a very polite head nod, hey, nice job, great presentation, but nothing would actually happen, right? And they weren't inspired to do something with me. Or I'd get flat out people literally saying, I don't get it. I don't know what you're talking about. Or I'd hear afterwards that the talk that happens, the water cooler talk, is like, nah, that'll never work, right? These are the things we don't do that. We don't think about this. We don't think about it like that. So that started to shift for me was, okay, to do this, again, I'm going to have to practice what I preach. And from a human-centered design standpoint, really start to listen to people and invite them into this journey. And so I spend a lot of time every time that we're doing anything, whether it's a project in the organization or proposing to change a new way of thinking around something internally. I work with people from across the organization, and I bring them in, and a lot of what I spend my time doing is designing how to facilitate conversations that make them a part of what we're creating. And it's not just learning from their experiences and what they're doing, but actually having them feel and be part of creating the solution. And so they start to invest in that solution along the journey with us. So that to me has been the most successful thing. I think that also, again, having a very intentional learning mindset, you can't have a big ego or have a delicate ego when people tell you, hey, I don't get this, or this doesn't sound right to me, or I don't like the way that this is positioned, or I don't like your idea, or all of these things. Instead of getting defensive about those things, actually inviting a dialogue. Help me understand, how do we make this better? Okay, if that doesn't work, then how can we make it work? And what else can we explore? What are we not seeing intentionally? What are we not seeing that maybe we need to be exploring? Another big thing for me too is, what was that saying? You can't be a pastor in your own. What's it saying? You can't be a pastor in your own.
You can't be a prophet in your own land.
Prophet in your own land. There you go. Prophet in your own land. So sometimes people just simply, they're going to hear the same thing. They're just going to hear it from somebody else. And intentionally bringing somebody else into the equation helps a lot, because you get on more neutral ground. Like, okay, this is an outside thought leader that's coming in and proposing something. These are people that have certain experiences that we respect, their credentials. They're helping us to look at the world a little bit differently. And so I tried to bring in, I've always been a networker, and I'm always making connections with really good people that intrigue me. And I invite them back in to be a part of conversations with us. I've invited you guys in to be a part of conversations with us. How might we think differently about how we partner with academia, with ISU? And so when they hear it from somebody else and they get inspired to go, okay, these people aren't blocked in to a certain way of doing things, it starts to help the organization also open their minds about, oh, okay, we haven't thought about it. We haven't listened to it that way. And that's wonderful. And I think something to the point that you were making, Karen, earlier, it doesn't surprise me that you have so many people willing to come in and share their expertise and their journeys. I think people that are wired in a certain way to do innovation or be entrepreneurs, maybe it's because we do feel lonely sometimes, that sometimes you're out in the world doing these things, that whenever you have a chance to come back in and share, we jump at it. It's amazing, especially in the entrepreneurial world, in the startup space. It's amazing how giving people are of their experiences and their stories.
And I have a follow-up question for you, James. everything that you're talking about, it seems like it's just flowing from your mouth. It's like, yes, you do this and then you do that. And it seems so easy, but we know it's incredibly complex, especially when you're dealing with a wide range of personalities, experiences, and just people in the workplace. So could you talk a little bit more about human-centered design? Like, what is that? What can our students take from that in order to maybe fuel their future endeavors, which will most likely involve a lot of people around them?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the core, human-centered design is this notion of looking at, I would say, looking at a problem differently than maybe we have in the past, or how you traditionally approach it, especially in large corporations. Human-centered design starts with putting the person that you're trying to solve a problem for at the center of the equation. And so the idea is we begin by, first of all, asking ourselves, what is the big problem that we want to explore, that we want to solve for? And why do we want to solve for it? Why is this the most impactful thing for us to pursue, to explore? And as soon as we ask that question, we're also asking, who is this for, and like, what is it that they care about? And so there's the very first steps of human-centered design, and what carries on through the entire process is that the person you're designing a solution for is at the core and at the center of everything that you do. And you almost become obsessively curious about who they are, what their needs are, what their experiences are, what their environments are in which your product or your solution is going to play a role in their lives. And you're allowing them to co-design with you because they're talking to you, they're engaging with you in conversation. You're seeing them in their world, what they're doing, and you're really honing in on what is the problem that I need to solve for these people. And once you do that, once you start doing it, and we do that, by the way, to be a bit more technical, we do that through what we would call design research or discovery methods. There's a lot of typically more qualitative type approaches, because we really want to, the richness and the inspiration that we want to get comes from literally talking to people and allowing them to help us to see things we're not seeing. And we couple that too with data, with traditional market research. We expand our thinking with additional things that are going on in the world that relate to this, that are analogous. But ultimately, we're having that person be the driver of the thing that we want to explore. And when we get to the point of exploring a solution, that's something that's also very different in human-centered design. We don't start with a solution in mind. So we give ourselves space to dream as many different ways that we might solve this problem, so that we are intentionally, collaboratively with the perspectives and point of view of multiple people, the people that we're designing for, thinking of many ways that we might solve a problem. And then we take the ideas that are most what we would call kind of fit this nice mix of desirability from our customers, feasibility from a technical standpoint, and viability from a business standpoint. So is it desirable? Is it feasible for us to pursue? And does it actually make sense for us to play in this space, right? And we take those ideas, and in the quickest way possible, we create ways to bring the ideas to life and put them in front of people. And through this process, we're learning with people, what is it that they like? What don't they like? We're killing ideas really, really quickly, because we're not married to an idea, but we're evolving these ideas into something that's bigger and more impactful quickly, going towards market. Why is that so different? Because a lot of times what we do is we start with the idea and we fall in love with the idea. One of the things that I share with when I mentor student entrepreneurs especially is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make early on when they start to pursue entrepreneurship is love my idea. I'm not going to share it with anyone until it's completely buttoned up. I've crossed all my T's, dotted all my I's. I got all the funding that I think I need to get. And they just kind of, they won't bring it to the world until they feel it's perfect. And by then, they're so invested in it that when they bring it into the world and they realize that the market doesn't want their idea, you know, when that fails, they're all in. And it's a big blow to them personally, to their confidence. It's a huge blow potentially to their finances and all of this. And then when they fail, they never want to come back and do it again.
Yeah.
Why not try something different? Just to kind of finish the point, why not try a method where instead of over engineering your idea, you're taking small calculated steps. Even if you fail, you're learning from those failures. And each time you're letting the market help design what you're creating, and you're building your confidence towards the right thing that should be in the world.
James, I wonder if you could walk us through, because I love what you're saying is incremental steps, right, in conversation with users and the market. So could you walk us through maybe an example of what that might look like for you? How a specific example, you were going to introduce X product or you were going to work with X institution. Is there a way you can walk us through how that looked?
Yeah, you know what? Instead of, I was planning to share with you guys something that we're doing that is related to our own innovation challenge and how to bring entrepreneurship into the organization. And so instead of talking, I'm going to kind of take what you're asking, Karen, and share that example as doing exactly that. And it's not a product example, it's an internal strategy type of example, but it carries the same premise. So when we set out to say, okay, as an organization, we have to figure out how to make more space to pursue things that are outside of our core business. What's getting in the way of doing that? And without boring you guys too much on all the research that we did, what we did do is we brought in people from across the organization, innovation roles, non-innovation roles, practitioners to senior leadership. Again, staying true to what we are discussing here, we brought in external people. And we did a lot of co-design, early discovery sessions, interviews with people, what we call looking in interviews, or, we did some in-depth interviews. We presented concepts to them. We asked them to come up with concepts with us around what are the things that are getting in the way. And some of the big things that were getting in the way were around mindset and culture. They were around organizational design, the way that we have created or incentivized innovation happen, or the lack of a mechanism that supports and incubates ideas and actually brings them to the world. It was around prioritization and even just like breaking down some paradigms, some traditional paradigms of innovation, right? Or the culture. And it was also, how do we create psychological safety that allows people to be empowered to innovate and to take action in these things. So all of that traditionally, we might have tried to roll out or not done anything or introduced anything until we rolled out a very big enterprise-wide strategy to tackle all of those things. And what we're doing instead is we are saying, no, we're going to keep building on some of these ideas that we've been testing. And we're going to create an entrepreneurial team, a small entrepreneurial team that is a pilot of what we want to see modeled in the world. And so today we're actually, we got a green light to create entrepreneurial roles, very intentionally designed to tackle problems that are outside of our core business and to follow a process that gets them from a challenge all the way to actually launching a startup, a business.
Wow.
and with the intent of not launching a business or having a bunch of businesses that are always 100% going to be the winners, but just in being able to create the capability for us as an organization to do that. And so the going to market, quote unquote market, doing this, testing this team is in and of itself a pilot. So today we have an idea of what that looks like, but we thought, what is the smallest way that we could start this, the minimal commitment, very entrepreneurially thinking, how do we bootstrap ourselves to make sure that every step of the way when we make an investment, we're reflecting and asking ourselves, why are we investing now? Why are we going to the next stage in the process? And with the hopes that if we can pilot this one team, this one small team, right? Worst case scenario, we learn that this is not the right way to do transformational innovation in a company like Principal. Great. Then let's figure out everything that we learned and let's see how we need to pivot. We didn't make a big splash just yet. Best case scenario, this evolves and it starts to become a platform where now we don't have one small team, but we have multiple teams pursuing big ideas and with the same type of support and process in place that allows them to take something real into the world. And then what happens after that? That continues to evolve. The journey itself allows us to learn and see like what comes next. How does this become something that's even more at scale? Or how do we go beyond domestic to our global markets and have teams like this operating in those spaces? So even from an internal strategy standpoint, that is an example of a real use case using human-centered design and kind of applying what we're preaching to the challenge of innovation itself.
James, could I ask you something? I'm sold, so you just did it. But I wanted to also bring it to the context of innovation in business and finance. I'm going to make a big assumption here that your world has a different pace than the rest of us. So how do you have this space to have the human-centered design, to fail, to experiment things, while the market of business and finance is just like going at a super fast speed? So how do you work with those two fast and slow lanes?
That's a good question, Anna, and I think, I kind of call it the Goldilocks challenge.
I like that.
You're looking for the right mix of you have some things that are right in front of us, especially as a financial services industry that's very much a legacy industry, right? A lot of compliance, very risk adverse, been around forever. It's a big engine. And you see some things in that are happening in the future that you start getting a little bit concerned about, right? How is that going to shake up our world? But not everyone sees or is paying attention to those things. And so to get the people who we need to have behind us to help make these changes, if you're introducing ideas that are so far out there, challenges that are so far out there, that's not in their peripheral, right? It's not in their short-term vision. You just can't, again, you need to bring them along in that journey. So like, that's great, but it's not really real to me, right? On the other hand, if we're only always focusing on where we're playing today and not looking into the future, then that focus, as good as it is to make sure that we keep the wheels on the bus, by in and of itself becomes distracting to not pay attention to what's happening in the future. So the Goldilocks is like, how do we get people to see, okay, let's respect and understand why this matters, the things that we need to pay attention to today, but also make a little bit of space to see what's happening outside of where we are today. Today, we have startups in our space that are reinventing completely the traditional financial institution model. And that to me is both exciting and extremely scary, right? But also I love the kind of the challenge. And I think more and more companies like Principal, larger legacy financial institutions, are realizing that we have to figure out how to move the Titanic quicker, to be more agile, how to become better partners in an ecosystem of startups and academics and collaborators that are all trying to ultimately figure out the future, right? It used to be in our space in financial services that maybe innovation was almost exclusively around products and technology.
Yep.
And that's not the case anymore. Now we're in a space where innovation is, we're designing for new systems and experiences that customers are having, and traditionally customers who we've traditionally not even played with it, they haven't been in our lane. We're having to figure out how to now start tapping into those markets. We're having to figure out how to reimagine completely kind of our core business models. And the scary part in all of this is things like that are maybe not directly in our short-term vision that are happening and shifting the way that people interact and conduct themselves in the market. Even things like COVID, right? There's the sharing economy, there's the gig economy, there's blockchain and decentralized finance. There's fintech that is slowly removing the need for the middleman in this process, right? If we're not paying attention to those things, if we're not ideally actually partnering with the people that are exploring why those things should exist in the world, or what role that plays in our space, then those are the type of things that will catch us off guard, and we won't be ready to react. And the type of things. So to me, the things that keep me up at night are the things that are maybe not so obvious to our business. What is that thing that's going to disrupt our business model in a way that we can't react to? What is that thing that makes our value proposition no longer basically relevant in the marketplace? And we end up in situations like, the traditional use cases, Blockbuster, Netflix, and there's many more that are in that situation. So ultimately, it's a lot of figuring out how to approach those things. Another thing that I would throw in quickly, and again, something that probably relates a lot to what's happening with COVID right now, is, people no longer are looking at their finances, in the traditional sense, the way that we're used to it. The advisor, you save money, you do your retirement plan, blah, 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 right? Now, they're looking at their financial life integrated with their emotional life, their mental health, their physical health, living my best life. What does that mean? And so for a company like ours, not realizing how we imagine a world where we play in that kind of holistic space would be a big miss. We have to figure out how to integrate these things, whether or not we actually offer services or experiences in those other areas. We have to figure out what role we play in that big picture, because our customers, they'll demand that at some point.
So James, I am wondering about how do you get people to identify? So I'm thinking of our students who really are thinking of sort of what doesn't exist. That's their threshold, right? So that's what I should be thinking about. What doesn't exist? They do problem solving. They're really good at it. But really what you're talking about is how do we in our world not just think about what doesn't exist, but if we weren't just focused on what doesn't exist, but what should and could and might be way out there, do you have a strategy for helping our students scale that vision? How do they get to the vision beyond the sort of transactional, we need a product or service? How do they get to the far reaching out there, casting something beyond the things that keep you up at night? How do we get them to think about what are those things?
Yeah, that's a good question, Karen. I think that I would say even like one of the reasons why I love working with students in coaching, mentoring, or any of the workshops and those type of things is because every now and then I run into students who haven't been told that they can't change the world. And they fall in love with really big problems, and they're so ambitious, and they think that they can bring these big solutions to big problems into the world. I think that we kill that too quickly, usually, and that's why we don't get bold enough to pursue the big problems. A lot of times, the reason we're not going into what doesn't exist is because we're not incentivized to do what doesn't exist. We're incentivized to do the thing that's right in front of our face because that's just the way that most it's just a little operated, and it's kind of our safe space. And it's also where we get to have people kind of tell us, here are the things that you do. Here's what you do in step 1, step 2, step 3. When you decide to really pursue things, big problems, especially things that people have not pursued or, in areas that we haven't done before, there isn't a nice blueprint that tells you how to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking failure, that means that you have to also incentivize and allow for failure if you're doing what doesn't exist, which is not our system.
Exactly. And I think that that's a redesign mentality of the system.
Right.
It's a redesign mentality of corporations. If employers want to bring more people to pursue that type of work, they have to incentivize and design for it. But also, it's also a personal redesign.
Yeah.
So this is people who, and not everyone has to think this way by any means. It's just introducing a new perspective. But if you feel that you are the type of person that wants to solve big problems, you need to believe it first. You need to believe that it's worth solving. And that loneliness that I talked about at the beginning about this journey, the hard part, that's the hard part, because a lot of times the people that are pursuing the big stuff are going against the grain. They're going against their own leadership, their organizations, not that they're literally fighting the organization, but they don't have a lot of people coming behind them saying that's the right thing to do. Why are you pursuing this? Why do you keep nagging us? Why do you keep insisting on this thing? Why do you keep bringing this into the world? People will tell you that the thing is ugly, that it doesn't work, that you're wasting your time, you're chasing shiny objects. And the worst part is sometimes you start to listen to those people and believe it. And sometimes you even start to listen to your own self-critic and believe him or her in that process as well. And I shared with you guys before even coming into this conversation that I was going to be really honest and transparent with you guys, that I can't talk about that myself in my journey and not acknowledge that I have no idea how to do that myself yet today. That there are moments in my journey where, I wake up and I fight my imposter syndrome and I fight my self-doubt and all of the reasons why I don't think, maybe those people are right. And maybe I should stop doing this. Maybe I should stop fighting so hard for these things. But then I get up the next day and I keep at it and I keep doing what I keep doing every single day. I just show up and do it. And I don't know if I'm doing it right 100% of the time, but I know that I just need to do it. And so, I think that I don't know if I answered your question, Karen, but it's that persistence and resilience, because a lot of times it won't be clear and it won't be easy and people won't follow you.
I have a follow-up question. So you said that it starts with yourself, right? And you have to believe first before you convince other people. And I think you hit the nail on the head, imposter syndrome, getting past that. So for our students who often have these big, bright, bold ideas, could you tell them a little bit more about what is that process to actually believing it? Because we all have ideas. So at what point do you really start to believe? Does something just switch, or is it like a moment or like a revelation? Could you talk a little bit more about your experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I think that the more you do something, the more you get confident and start believing, in a variety of different ways. You take a small step, even if you fail, you realize that your failure wasn't as big as you thought your failure was going to be. You realize that you learned something and that you end up doing something else because you took that small step, and you want to take the next one. And then you take the next one, and maybe you win on that one, and you get a little bit of a confidence boost because you took the next step. And then you learn something, and then you take the next step. So to me, I feel like it's a combination of a million little steps that you take, and that you become brave enough to take, and that starts to build your confidence to keep going and doing something. I think that the more, also another component of that is, Nakaya, like how it's a little bit of perspective of how you look at the world, right? Quick story, early 2007, I was going off with a buddy of mine to launch a small lending business, and I was diagnosed with cancer. So I put all of that on hold. Long story short, went off and got treated for cancer. And all I could do at that time was focus on getting better, relying on my doctors, relying on people around me, and almost like just embracing this fact that there's an uncertain future. I didn't even know if there would be a future after cancer for me. But there would be this uncertain future of what happens after cancer. And I would need to just trust this process. Or I didn't know at the time that that's what I was doing, but I was learning that in this journey. And all of a sudden, the things that I was so focused, the plans, all the stuff that I cared about so much, when those shifted and I had to start over, I had to, figure things out again. I did it. I figured it out. Better or worse, things start to happen. And what that shifted for me in my life, and how I connect that back to innovation, is that cancer taught me resilience, and it taught me to look at the fact that life itself will come with all of these twists and turns, right? And I really believe that life becomes your best teacher if you're willing to listen to it. Particularly in those moments, I think the best learnings come from the valleys in your life, when things in that moment feel like they're going wrong, and you turn around and you realize, man, had I not gone through that, I would have never learned this thing. I would have never thought differently about this. So if you have a perspective that's going to be learning constantly, that will allow you to get humble, because you have to change the way you look at your worldview sometimes on certain things. And you also have a knack for just going off and trying little things constantly and learning with those little things. I think that's the thing that gets you propelled towards doing this, Natalia. And it's not an easy thing, but if there's something I would recommend for any students as they walk away from this conversation, is if there's something that you feel passionate about, a problem that you really believe in, fall in love with that problem, pursue it, believe that you can do it, really take the time to understand the people that you're trying to solve a problem for in the world, and take small steps. Just start to do it. Test it. One of the things that I hear from people all the time is like, well, that sounds great, James, but then how do you do that? Because how do you create a prototype of something that requires so much technology? My idea is great, but I need all of this technology. I don't even know how to do it. Start with a paper concept of what your technology is meant to do. Put that in front of people. Let them react to what you're telling them, and see where it takes you from there. Start with a bit of a wireframe. Start connecting with people that can help you fill in those gaps that you potentially have yourself about a skill set to build something out. Build out a cardboard lemonade stand that represents your shop, and put it in front of somebody and talk about what your idea is. You can do so many little things that you could put into the world. You just have to decide that it's worth your time to do it. You have to have a learning mindset to listen, And you have to have a determination, a grit to keep going if it's worth pursuing.
I think you also talk about, James, the one of the necessary requirements for an innovator is to see risk and failure, or the possibility of failure, as an invitation to relationship. The relationship is necessary in order to continue to innovate, and the courage to have relationship, to be vulnerable, is really important. And I would say you have built your life and your success, personal success, around that capacity to create risk in relationship, to show up vulnerably, to allow for difference. I'm wondering if you might speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. Again, I feel it's not something I set out to do as a plan, right? I think that the more I saw how my ability to let my guard down, to become more vulnerable with people, drove connection with them and empathy with them, allowed me to empathize with them and for them to empathize with me. And to, one of the big things maybe in that scenario, Karen, is I will admittedly say I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I'm someone who, as I fight my imposter syndrome and all of these things, worried a lot about how to position myself more polished and make sure I'm saying the right thing and presenting something that feels like it's tight and buttoned up. But here's what happens when you are always positioning yourself that way. Then people don't feel invited to be part of a real conversation with you. They're there just to either listen to you, to give you a pat in the back and say, nice job. They're going to maybe give you a thumbs up, or maybe they'll be critics of whatever you do, no matter how good it is, right? When you intentionally start to break some of that down and you invite people into the messiness and you say, hey, I don't know this, but I have a hunch here, or I'm trying to learn this, or I'm trying to work on this better. And you tell people, this is how it feels, and this is why it's hard, and here's really what I'm going through. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, but this is what you experience, is more and more people go, yeah, I feel that way too. And here's how I've done it, and here are the mistakes I've made. And the more and more that you experience that, especially with the people you're designing solutions for in the process of like human-centered design, you start to make a human connection. You start realizing how powerful and impactful that human connection is. And that the more you do that, I think also there's it's a really humbling experience, because this grandiose idea of yourself starts to go away, and you start going, man, I thought I knew something. I don't know crap, right? These people are really helping me to see the world in a way that I haven't seen it before. And it gets exciting, actually, to know that there are others who can help you to look at things in ways that you haven't seen it before. So I think it's an authentic decision that you make at some point to start putting your guard down and start realizing that you have benefits of connection with people through doing that. And little by little, that becomes a muscle memory that you just start to build and build and build. And you make that who you are every time that you show up, for better or worse, right? And sometimes it works in your favor. Sometimes people appreciate that. Sometimes they won't. And that's a decision that you have to make, whether or not you choose to put your stake in the ground for that.
That's an amazing segue for Nakaya. Bring some of the questions that students put in. They ask exactly that.
Yeah, we have a few questions. I will ask you the one that will really tie back what you just said, James. So this question is from Nadine. What is some advice you can give about being a perfectionist? I have a tendency to find ways to procrastinate and slow myself down, to blame my mistakes on that instead of myself. What are some ways I can improve in that aspect?
Yeah, first of all, Nadine, I totally feel you. So, you're my people.
Follow up from Nadine as well. I never know how to ask for help. I grew up equating that to weakness. I prefer independent, and I know that's not ideal in certain situations. Please help.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great question. Um, Start small. I think kind of like everything else that we're talking about, Nadine, I think start with an intentional small step, something that makes you feel just safe enough to ask for help, to invite people into your messiness, to not be a perfectionist, and put that out there and see how it goes, see what you learn, be open to learning, and come back and try it again. And the other thing is, I think there's an internal dialogue that you constantly just need to have with yourself, and be okay with knowing, hey, I'm a perfectionist. That's okay. It's nothing you should beat yourself up over. Actually, maybe one thing that you can think about, Nadine, is like, where is it that my perfectionist has served me good in my life? It's served a function. It's helped me to be really good at when I do these things. Those are my superpowers. But at the same time, when has it become my kryptonite? And change your dialogue with yourself a little bit, and ask yourself, okay, if I'm a perfectionist, if that's what the title that you want to give yourself is, I'm a perfectionist. It shouldn't be a badge of shame. It shouldn't be something that you're ashamed of. But again, something that just simply is part of who you are. And where does it show up for you in a good way, and where does it maybe not show up for you so well? And you can talk to yourself and go, hey, listen, this is when it's not doing something that's favorable for me. And as a perfectionist, getting comfortable, again, practice makes comfort and confidence come about a lot faster. So to me, as a perfectionist, the more I take small steps, and then the work that I do constantly, intentionally putting things out that are incomplete, rough prototype that I intentionally want people to kill and do away with, sticky notes that I can throw away really quickly and scrap and do something else. Those little steps help to get more confident in a space where I don't have control over everything being figured out and perfect. And that's just helped me out. I hope that's a really good question. I hope that helped a little bit.
Nakaya,
Sorry.
I was going to say that Nakaya has a great question that came from Tom, which James knows so well.
Yes.
Could you tell us some prompts on how to start a conversation and how to get to that point? So you were telling Nadine to start small, and then you start and you are all engaged and off you go. But then you meet someone who actually, it's not your inner critic, it's not the imposter syndrome, it's literally someone who is a dissident. And in the conversation, you actually have to get them on your back to be in your ambassadors or to trigger something. And how do you start those conversations without breaking the relationship that Karen was talking about? Yeah.
So this is specific to starting conversations with people who don't agree with your point of view. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, to me at least, what has worked has been to, if I can, sometimes number one, accept that if I'm flustered by something, if it's really bothering me, it's probably not the best time to start the conversation. So I need to go back and kind of process that a little bit and get past my who does he or she think she is, and how dare you? That's just kind of a natural knee-jerk reaction. But after that, I think what serves me well is then, okay, get myself out of the equation. Where is this person potentially coming from? If you can get curious, I used to, one thing that helped me a lot in my journey was starting my career in sales. I loved every time that someone would say no to me when I was trying to sell them something. I fell in love with, why are they saying no? I have to figure out how to turn that no into a yes. And so I got like extremely curious about like, why are you saying no? What is it that didn't click with you? How can I turn that around? So it's kind of same mindset. Like, how can I get curious about why they're not connecting with me? And most of the time, the superficial thing is that they're reacting to something that you're putting out there, right? Some idea, I don't think that'll work, etc. But if you dig a little bit under the covers, you ask why, you start realizing there's more to it. And sometimes it's also like a very personal thing for them. You struck a chord you didn't even realize you struck that really mattered to them, and that's why they're not engaging with you. There's an exercise we do just in design where we intentionally critique design, right? And put people to do things like say, hey, I like this, but I wish that this also included, or you addressed this thing, or I wonder if you would have thought about this thing. I love when we ask questions like the 5 whys. There's a 5 whys exercise. We can say, okay, we think that this is a great idea because it solves this problem. Well, why is that a problem? Well, because of blah, blah, blah. Okay, why? Tell me more about that. Why? And you go through these iterations of whys to get at the heart of the problem. All of them, what they have in common is you can turn these conversations around from confrontational to opportunities to listen and co-design. And sometimes what people are disagreeing with, like I said, is more about not being heard or not being acknowledged because you struck some fear that's deep and innate in them. Not necessarily because your idea is bad, but you'll internalize that and you'll make it about yourself because that's just what we do, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Tom was also, it helps a lot. Tom was also talking not just the fears, but the frustrations or emotional drivers that people have. And you were talking from the standpoint of design, leaving your shoes and dressing someone else's shoes and really listening to that. And sometimes it's not that they're saying no to you, they're saying no to a frustration, right?
Yeah. I think in a similar vein, something I love to do also when we go out and put ideas or concepts in front of people, I love to intentionally put provocations in front of people that I know that they're going to have a reaction to. I know it right out of the gate. I actually, it's maybe a ridiculous value proposition that there's no way that would be good, or maybe something intentionally might strike an emotional chord with them. And we'll put that out there intentionally, knowing that we'll get a reaction to understand better why that reaction exists. Yeah. Because sometimes we don't even put that out there because we're safeguarding ourselves from getting a reaction from somebody. But we also don't ask, we don't go a little deeper. So we just start to make our own story around why somebody is upset, why they don't like this, why they're dissenting from a point of view that we have. And most of the time your story is wrong because your story is only looking at it from your point of view. So again, goes back to curiosity and a genuine interest in learning from people and listening to them. You'd be surprised how that shapes your point of view as well.
I have a follow-up question on that, James. So how do you lose the right to be offended in your role? Because I'm sure people probably say no, or we don't like this or that, and there's all this stuff going on. How do you not internalize that? How do you keep it separate? How do you not get offended? How do you not get weighed down after a while?
You don't lose the right to be offended. I think if somebody figured that out, then they should surely let me know. No, you can still absolutely get offended. And I think it's also on how emotionally invested you become on certain things. That's why I'm such a fan in this process, that you're stepping into the process intentionally, taking small sacrificial steps on things that you're not emotionally invested in. So if I throw a paper concept in front of you that I know I could care less if you like it or don't, I just want to learn from your reactions, I'm not going to get offended by it. But if you're reacting to something I feel really strongly about, and that's at the core of who I am, my values, then I might get offended. Yeah, I will get offended. I'm probably almost 100% sure. And it's okay. Like I think that's the thing. I equate this a little bit too to bias. Bias training is a big thing in corporate America, especially given the everything that we've experienced in 2020. And those are just so important lessons and things to understand and build internally. But what I love about that is that most of the time when you really pay attention to the bias training, it doesn't say don't have biases. It says you will have biases.
Have biases. You have.
Yeah, exactly. You will have them. You have them, and you just need to be aware of them, and you need to have mechanisms to help you understand when those biases are getting in the way of what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're treating people, how you're looking at the world, how you're looking at opportunities, etc. So it's a little bit of that, Nikaya. It's like figuring out, accepting that some things will trigger you, but being able to see, okay, I was triggered. Why was I triggered? Why do I care so much about this? And then coming back to just being really curious and asking yourself, like, why is it that this person is reacting this way, or that they're saying this thing, or trying to understand their worldview.
James, as we think about it, too, I'm realizing there are some things that immediately shut down the process of innovation. One of them is, of course, if you're walking around being offended all the time, people are not really going to co-create with you. I am thinking, so as I think about from a student standpoint, what are things that I might want to know that you as a young innovator would want to know? What are things as an innovator that you absolutely don't do, that you would absolutely not do, that would get in the way of working with people, places, things, and idea, of growing, of making progress? Give us the things that you wouldn't do, absolutely wouldn't do, and also the things that you absolutely must do.
So I think that question, well, maybe one way that I'll approach that is to say like this: I believe that anyone can be an innovator. So innovator is not a title. It's not. So if I'm thinking about, like, maybe I'll reframe that a little bit, Karen, into like, if I'm looking at the people that I want to bring onto my team, whether it's I'm hiring them or whether it's I'm working with them or collaborating with them, there isn't a skill set that I would say as an innovator you must have this skill set, because you can come from all walks of life, honestly, and be a fantastic innovator. You can be a designer, product development person. You can be a finance person. You can be a compliance person. Like you can have a really strong skill set in a certain area and still have an innovative mindset or entrepreneurial mindset. What I look for, and that I think is really important for people who are going to do this work, is something that's been a common theme of what we've been talking about right now: humility and a learning mindset, an openness to receive different perspectives, different worldviews, a curiosity to want to learn more about the problem, the people that you're creating a solution for, almost obsessively wanting to learn what's going on. And also like an authenticity that's almost unapologetic. And again, there's a lot of rewiring. I keep thinking back to Nadine's question about perfectionism. We've been kind of taken down this funnel where you need to be told to look a certain way, to talk a certain way, to present yourself in a certain way, to fit a nice little box, because that's what employers will want. That's what's going to help you grow the corporate, in the corporate ladder. Even relationally, maybe that's what the right partner will like for you in your life and stuff like that. I kind of would put that a bit on its head. A lot of times what we sacrifice for trying to fit that box is our authenticity of like really who you are and bringing yourself to the table and being almost unapologetic of that. Like I love Anna. I love the name of the company that you guys have come up with for your students, right? Thinking remind me again. It's the Misfit Noodle, right?
Yeah.
Misfit Noodle, and it's embracing the misfit. It's embracing the real self that is unapologetic of who they are, but at the same time open to collaborate with others. Because here's the thing, right? You can have someone who is really detail oriented and like just obnoxiously always thinking about the details, and you can have another person that's like me. It's a big dreamer, big sky thinker, and obnoxiously ambiguous and vague, and and both of those could be really good skill sets to bring together if you're open to collaborate and combine those skill sets and look at the world, together and respect those points of view. I think another thing, Karen, quickly is change the no mindset into a yes and. When your first reaction is to say no, to say this can't be done, it's okay. Like we talked about before, maybe that has served you right in many times, maybe in the work that you do, and realize that and go, okay, that's helped me to avoid making some very unnecessary risky things that could have cost me dearly. But at the same time, if that's always the first reaction, then you'll never pursue anything outside of what you currently know. So yes and mindset is just take a moment to stop and think, what if I don't completely see this thing, but what if we looked at it this way? And what if I added this? And how can I go and explore this a little bit more, giving yourself the space to do that?
Can I ask one question? Well, several connections that you, again, it's terrible. Let's see if I can order my thoughts. So first, thank you for saying what if, because that's the big motto of our flagship innovation series. It's really what if. But my question would be, first I'll ask the question and then I'll tell you why this. Aren't you exhausted? And I'll explain why. So my father said that those of us who are in the world of design or innovation or entrepreneurship said you're always either the trailblazer and the scout, so you know that you're going to be, you're the first one to go, and then the rest will continue, or you are so far ahead, you see something that we don't see, so you're a futurist. It's not about what would be, but it's like how it should be, that sometimes the moment is not lived. However, you were just talking about that, is that you don't know the no's. You just are wired internally on yes, and. So how do you keep yourself centered? Because I'm hearing your voice, I'm looking at your body language, I'm listening to the way you're putting thoughts together for our students. And I find delicious, because I am exhausted, I find delicious that you are grounded. So tell us some advice, if you can. Share with us how you are not exhausted. That's the preempt for my question. Sorry.
No, thank you for that, Anna. If I'm doing any kind of good job of coming across grounded and not exhausted, then that's a plus. I think that's that's a feeling, along with the imposter syndrome, along with oh shit moments, along with I have people around me sometimes that, even at work, that help me walk off a ledge when I'm like, no, it's not worth it anymore. I can't do it. And just a lot of intentional personal time, also just spending around perspective, right? I have to check myself a lot of times, because I could get really, really passionate. I have you guys are no strangers to my soapboxes, and James can go on and on about his soapboxes on something or another. So sometimes I have to put that in check, and I have to put that in perspective and go, why worry so much about these things? You'll live to fight another day. Get up and do it again the next day, and the next one, and the next one after that. But sometimes I feel exhausted. Sometimes I get anxious. Sometimes I get insecure and nervous, and and all of those feelings can get overwhelming about what I do on a regular basis, or maybe it's just how I'm wired. I don't know if it's the work that I do or just how I'm wired. So again, I would be completely fake coming here and saying like, I'm just grounded and I figured out how to do that.
Exactly.
One step at a time.
James, I think if anything that makes you grounded is the eternal and, right? The return, the constant return to the day. And I'm hearing so much from our students that they are blowing up with roommates, or, you know, really stressed with COVID, or this seems interminable, or I'm really nervous about this, or it's exams, or how do I have holiday? But one of the things that occurs to me that makes really you so successful as I hear you speak, and other people that I know who are successful, is that sense of and. I am both really at odds with my roommate and it feels like I'll never have a relationship with him again. And I am capable of repairing relationship. I am really exhausted with my exams. Or I cannot innovate my way out of a paper box. And I know myself well enough that I have come to this space before and found something new. I think that one of the gifts that you bring our team, James, really compellingly, is you wait with us and then come back to, and I wonder if, and I wonder if, you know, and I think that that itself, that practice of allowing for all those parts, the anxious part, the frustrated part, the exhausted part, and that confidence in the part that innovates, the part that shows up every day, the part that takes a risk in relationship. That's what gives me the experience of you being so grounded.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I would say, you know, to that point, maybe what that makes me think about is, again, a bit of a paradigm shift that I personally have been working on myself throughout my life is I grew up with very traditional, well-intended, wonderful parents. But, you know, you learn to put the game face on, work hard, push the emotions down, you know, be strong, don't show weakness, a lot of these things. And the more and more in my journey, I started realizing I wasn't being strong. The game face becomes a facade if you don't acknowledge and address what you're actually going through, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. And so you're not actually honoring what's really happening to you. And at some point that starts to break you, right? And you don't, it actually works against being strong. So for me, the honoring what's happening, honoring the fact that you haven't figured it out, honoring the fact that you're scared shitless of I'm sorry, I keep using the words. It's just, you know, you're scared of the next thing you're going to do, this next presentation, this next pitch that you're going to do. It's going to bomb. I'm actually, as much as I'm talking right now, I have a tremendous fear of public speaking and things like that. Like, it's not my thing, right? So I, you know, all the time have, oh man, you're going to bomb. You're going to do these things. I just acknowledge that's there. Okay, it's there. And now show up. And now come back in and do it, you know, and keep showing up and keep doing it. If there's a recommendation that I would leave for anyone listening to this is, you know, it's worth the pain to do things that scare you tremendously, to fall flat on your face, to get up and get bruised up and get back up and do it again. It's so much more rewarding than staying in the cheap seats and never jumping in there and trying it out. At least for me. For me, that's a life well lived. So that's the balance that I would put on that.
I know that we are reaching the end of the time, so I want to be conscious of that. But many conversations that our team has been having with our students and innovation fellows ends up also being in this concept of job identity. And I'm reading here that you are senior experience design and innovation strategist, which are big words. But I also see innovation in business and finance. So I know that you are a financial advisor. I'm just joking, of course.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know. But now they are taking their majors, they're being engineers and they're being designers and architects. And I apologize to all of you about your majors. But what is this thing about the new generation, Generation Z? Or the millennials, and Nakaya here speaks about that many times. How can we prepare our future, and I'm thinking about my kids as well, to accept that you can be an innovation strategist and that's your job identity. That's the thing that you love to do and you love what you do and that expression. And it's no longer being a financial salesperson. It's your job identity. You are an innovation strategist. So how do we unwrap that or wrap it for our students as a conclusion for our conversation? Yeah.
And I don't know if you're going to like my answer, so I'll preface it with
So
this.
don't worry.
I don't think it should be your identity,
Okay.
your title. And as a matter of fact, right now, I don't use that title very much, other than it helps to provide a little bit of like what I do. In this new team that we're talking about, we're actually introducing a new title for the organization. So we're talking about resident entrepreneurs. And that's something a little like, what is that? Who does that? And what is it about? And that kind of stuff. I think it was more important before, in a more traditional job market, that even the way that we thought about pricing jobs and like understanding how people get promoted from one job to another and all of those things, then the job title mattered for logistical reasons. Like, how do you in a resume go, oh, okay, yeah, those people do that thing, so they'll be a fit for this job, right? It still plays a role. I think that plays a role, and it's part maybe less job title, more personal brand nowadays. It's like, how do you connect with a personal brand that tells the story of who you are very succinctly and helps people understand what you're about. I don't know necessarily job title per se, but I do know that, or at least I have a big hunch that we are in this unique moment of transition into a future workforce, that all of these preconceived notions that we have about job titles and roles and identities are going to be put on its head. I think that people will have more blended roles. I think they'll have deeper specialties in some areas, but also more cross-functional experiences and be part of jobs that are so collaborative that it kind of blends a little bit of like, it's not one fit, it's not one department. I think that more and more companies in large companies are reimagining the traditional kind of org structure. You'll have more entrepreneurial, my hunch, so this is purely James, you'll see more of traditional organizations start to mimic the gig marketplaces that exist outside of them, just to be able to attract talent and keep them. Because the reality is that today, especially with COVID broke down an unspoken paradigm of like, butts and seats matter. Like, you have to be on location, full-time employee. No longer true. Organizations are taking stances now and saying, we'll hire people remotely from anywhere. And people are realizing, I can go work for a large organization and I could be doing some side hustles on the same time, and gig contract work. And now it's easy because I can do that remotely, and things like that. So I think my best answer to that, it's a very long answer, like everything else I've been saying today, Anna, but I think the best answer is, don't worry so much about fitting a job title or creating an identity around a job title. Figure out who you are, what your purpose is, what you're passionate about, the thing that you stand up for, and let that be your North Star, regardless of where that takes you. And again, be unapologetic about that.
James, I love that we're ending on this note too, because to me, it is, you have to innovate. You have to, as the next level of employee, and I wouldn't even call it employee, of collaborator. You have to go into a workplace anticipating you will go in as a collaborator toward and elevating the company's business goal. That is your role. And then you have to design your role. You have to think more deliberately as a student going into the marketplace. You have to think more deliberately about how am I designing a role that's less about hours and presence and more about outcomes and impact. And so I think that on that note, that's a good note to end on and a good note for us to think about even as teachers of that next generation. I want to thank you, James, today. You were just absolutely wonderful, authentic, grounding. I appreciate the territory that you covered. And I know we'll be working with you well into the future and in many respects. And so be prepared, students and faculty, to watch for James. Thank you, Nakaya. Thank you, Anna. And before we go, I will say, please remember, we are going to have a Flagship Innovator Series next semester. We may do a little bit more with the time, a little bit, maybe cutting back a little bit on the time in terms of the hour that is offered, the same hour, but maybe not so much. And then also pre-prepared on December 4th for faculty, staff, and graduate students. And James, you. Sarah Marchetti is going to be giving a workshop on Gen Z, how to think and understand and interact and engage with that next generation and how we are a part of them and how we collaborate. Also, next semester, we have some really, really wonderful short circuits. Let's make a deal with the deans, how to negotiate, how to make friends and influence the deans, basically how to engage stakeholders. It's not a small world after all, how to deal with people in diverse populations, make me a millionaire by 40, how to gain an unfair advantage. And we have coming up Bill Gross, who is one of the most creative innovators in our world today, works with Idea Labs and was the co-founder of Energy Vault, CEO of Heliogen, and one of Fast Company's most creative people in business in the world for 2020. So we're not done. And by any means, as James knows, we're just beginning. And James, thank you again. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much,
This
James.
has been such a pleasure. I always enjoy it with you guys. And actually, Karen, your invitation is very much real. Anyone who wants to continue to talk, I'm happy to make this space and just to connect with anyone, honestly. So thank you all for having me. This has been so much fun.
Thank you, James. Have a lovely weekend.
You too. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.